Dr. Alfonsi, because me and her have a lot of common. And very early on in my academic career, when I started teaching, I've been teaching over 15 years now. I recognized that students are coming into my classroom with less and less knowledge of American government, the Constitution, who's responsible for what, with Congress and the president and the judicial branch. And it was just, it really amazed me, but it also made me very curious as to what's really going on. And part of the problem is that we continue to call things civics. And the left does a really good job with language. They use language extraordinarily effectively. And basically, it's not civics that's being taught, it's activism that's actually being taught. And they masquerade it as civics because they're smart. They know that if they call it activism, parents are going to be outraged. It doesn't matter what the political ideology of the parents is. The parents don't want their children becoming activists, and that's why they still call it civics. So unfortunately, by continuing the charade of calling it civics, the left knows that parents are going to think back to what they learned in school. They're going to think back to a time when we had this appreciation for the United States, when we had this appreciation for the founding fathers and the documents, the brilliant documents that they put forth. And these documents were critical. So by continuing to call it civics, it makes parents in the dark, but something's happened. And maybe it's the coronavirus. I think that actually has a lot to do with it. Obviously, the woke mobs have a lot to do with it, but parents have begun to open their eyes. They're starting to pay more attention into what's going on in the education system. But I want to remind everyone, when I spoke to you a month ago, I explained the three main goals of the American education system. I mean, everyone knows about reading and writing and math. We all understand how important that is. We all understand that that's something that we have to continue to educate students on. But the beginnings of our education system also incorporated the ideas of the virtues of family, the sense of community, things like manners and discipline. And there were three major goals within the education system. One was to build out a sense of nationhood. As the immigration class was rising in the 1800s here in the United States, we quickly realized that we need a robust public education system in order to create this sense of nationhood. We are a unique and special nation. Understand, there's no other country like ours out there. We don't have 5,000 years of recorded history together. We don't have a common culture, a common language. So, what binds us together? Well, it's the appreciation and the values that were laid out in the Declaration of Independence and the founding documents. And so this robust public education system is going to help create this sense of nationhood to bring us to become a country of one, provide us with a national identity. And this is going to be necessary to hold the country together. If we don't have a national identity, we don't have a country. Just look at Afghanistan. Hasn't really worked out too well for them being a tribal country that they are. The second goal of the education system was the concept of good citizenry. You need good citizens in order to have a thriving and successful nation. We need to know what our role is within this system. What's our responsibilities? What's our obligation, not just to family and our faith, but what's our obligation to our communities, to the country as a whole? And so the second goal of the education system is extremely important. And then you have the third goal of the education system, and that's empowering students to think critically. Students are empowered when they learn how to think for themselves, when they understand how to generate and organize ideas, when they're able to defend their positions in a clear and succinct manner. And the idea of critical thinking was something that was seen as one of the most useful skills you could have. I mean, when you could think for yourself, that's what empowerment is. And these three goals are essential to continue the success of the United States. Now, unfortunately, that has taken a turn for the worse, and it's been happening for quite a long time. We're just waking up to this fact now of how bad and how serious the problem really is. And Dr. Alfonsi is going to allude to that. But we have to look at how we got to this point to a certain degree, as far as pretty much eliminating these goals from the system. A lot of it has to do with that we now have bureaucrats that are making education policy, and we have the ever growing expansion of administrators. Now, every college and most K through 12 administrations, if you go back, you'll find, a handful of deans, maybe a principal, vice principal, and two deans. Well, now there may be four principals, there may be four or five vice principals, there's about 20 deans, and you have all these administrators that aren't in the classroom, that don't understand the classroom, and they're the ones making education policy. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Then you have the politicians, who are some of the dumbest people in the entire world, who are passing legislation in regards to education, and they really don't know the education system. I mean, they don't understand the problems in the classroom, they don't understand the student body, they don't understand the teachers. So that's a big problem. We have a new generation of teachers. The baby boom teachers retired. Left wing teachers and professors is nothing new to academia. I mean, it's always been the majority flows to the left of the ideological spectrum. However, the new generation is much different than the previous left wing teachers. The previous left wing teachers did have an appreciation for knowledge, they did have an appreciation for the value of critical thinking. They had an appreciation of teaching their students how to craft their arguments, and they would never impose their beliefs on their students. They would try and do it on other faculty members, but they didn't do it on other students. Today, we have a bunch of teachers that are really ideologues. They're nothing more than that. They believe their opinions and their ideology are more important than the facts that exist. And they want to manipulate and change history. They want to manipulate and change facts. But as Ben Shapiro says, facts, they don't care about feelings. And what was it? I think Benjamin Franklin said that facts can be stubborn things. We've moved away in our education system from the idea of critical thinking to a system of obedience and compliance. And this has created a lot of problems. Unfortunately, the student body of today doesn't help the situation because they are lazy. Okay. And I'm not ashamed to say that the youth of today, they don't have the hunger for knowledge that existed, 15, 20, 30, 50, 60, 70 years ago. They lack curiosity. And I think a large part has to do with the technology. But to them, it's easier to be told how to think. It's easier to be told what to think rather than how to think. And that becomes a problem. And we see this over reliance on technology throughout all schools. That's become a real problem. And something that a lot of people don't talk about is the tech companies that provide a lot of these technological instruments to the schools at steep discounts, sometimes even giving it to the schools for free. And nobody ever questions it. Nobody asks any questions whatsoever. And they don't realize that the tech companies, they don't care about education. They don't care about empowering children. They don't care about even degrees. What they care about is customers for life. Every study shows that once you get hooked on a certain piece of technology, that you're going to be a customer for life. So if you use an iPhone, well, it's going to be very hard for you to change from the iPhone to the Galaxy. And so you have the competition of the big tech trying to get in these classrooms, and that's created a lot of problems as well. Finally, you have what has led to the situation hitting critical mass, and that's the breakdown of the family unit. Okay, the breakdowns of the families have become an extremely big problem. As a matter of fact, if you speak to a lot of the teachers, particularly ones that have been teaching for 20 years, they'll tell you when it comes to things like back to school night and parent engagement, parent involvement, it's dropped off dramatically. We have 70% in certain communities that are being born in single parent households, 40% overall in the United States today, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity. 40% of kids today are in single parent households. And we've actually, in a bizarre time where there are some that actually are trying to get rid of the idea of the family unit, to get rid of the idea of the nuclear family. And that includes the Black Lives Matter organization, who actually had that in their charter. They now removed it because of the criticism they were getting. But the idea of destroying the nuclear family isn't helpful to the situation, because a single parent, it's very difficult for them to be able to put food on the table, provide clothing and housing. They're working their tails off. And then for them to be involved in their kids' academic life is very difficult. And we know that every study shows that the younger you have children, that the more likely you're going to have a low paying job. And it does create problems. But we're even seeing problems in the two parent households, because parents have disengaged from the education process. They've outsourced education, and they said, well, that's the teacher's job. That's the school's job. You know, we live in a day and age where it's extremely expensive. Both parents will be usually be working 9 to 5, 10 to 6, whatever the times are, that by the time they get home, now they have to feed their children, they has to clean up, give baths, whatever it is. And do they really feel like sitting with the children, going over everything they've learned in school and trying to go through their homework? And so parents have disengaged from the education process as well. And it's been to the students' detriment. It's been to our children's detriment. And we need to wake up to that, because all we did was outsource our children's education to a bunch of ideologues that want to essentially brainwash them. And it's causing a lot of problems. And then you have the parents that would rather be the child's friends, and the extracurricular activities are more important than the academics. That's created a whole new problems. But there is good news out there. There are solutions to these problems. And when we look at it, we could thank people like Dr. Alfonsi, who's actually working on trying to reestablish, re-engage, reintroduce the concept of love of country within our schools, with the importance of America and everything it stands for. The American political philosophies of liberty and freedom, and the appreciation for what the founding fathers have done. I think Dr. Alfonsi is doing fantastic work. And so I want to introduce her, and she could elaborate on exactly what she's doing, particularly in the state of Florida, and how this could be the blueprint for the rest of the country. So, Dr. Alfonsi, I'd like to thank you for coming, and the floor is yours.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Nick. I really want to welcome everyone, and thank you for welcoming me. And as Phil just said, I'm coming live from Israel, which is nice. It's better than not being live. But I want to say something about civic standards that we have to understand. I think the greatest gift to reestablishing civics and the love of this country is coming at this moment from the state of Florida, from Governor DeSantis, because Governor DeSantis was the first person to demand removing Pearson textbooks, and they are the most egregious publishers in this country with their errors. He also went after Common Core, but his stand, and I'm honored to be to have ended up with civics on my plate due to Governor DeSantis. We have to talk about K through 12. This is a phenomenon that, for me, that I'm able to see it and analyze it from kindergarten through the time we graduate our students from high school. One thing that Nick alluded to that we have to put into this is the fact that many of the parents of these children who are in school now were educated with the exact same textbooks, a different edition perhaps, but the same textbooks with the leftist agenda, the same textbooks with publishing houses funded by money from Saudi Arabia, then Qatar, the same publishing houses with ties to George Soros. So you have parents who are already indoctrinated, and the indoctrination is in the household. So these sons, I have to say that the presentation, when I first saw the standards, and these are standards in Florida that have been in use for 5 years. It was time for the revision process to go on. And I said, how did no one notice that the state of Florida is functioning with civic standards that can only be described as skewed towards what is commonly known as the New World Order? And what we found in the standards are not typos, they are not errors, they are actually very subtle, agenda-based, to turn the country away from being a constitutional republic, to destroy American exceptionalism. This is a terminology that goes with the falsification and the indoctrination. Because when President Trump spoke about fake news, we should really apply fake news to the fake information that we are feeding or being fed to our students. So these standards, that the K through 12 standards, Governor DeSantis wanted a succinct sentence. Now he didn't know me then that I don't do succinct little sentences too well. So he had a 3-page succinct sentence about the standards. And I said that these standards in Florida, which are actually across the country, they do not have as their purpose to create good American citizens or to strengthen American citizenship. We cannot, in these standards, we do not find a definition of what it is to be a good citizen. The state of Florida has standards which said to obey crossing guards, to make sure your dog doesn't poop on the sidewalk, and other such. And this is what it means to be a good citizen and to get along with other people. They do not create American citizens, these standards. But more important is that we grew up with a definition of citizenship. We grew up with the concept of what it means to be loyal to the United States of America, to support its Constitution, to support its flag. Do you know how it made me feel so happy to stand up and be able to do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of my country? And yet we are dealing with standards and the pathway. The problem of the textbooks, the problems don't come from the publishing house to the states. The problems are created by the standards, whether it be in the standards for civics, the standards for world history, the standards for US history, because I'm in all of those. That is the road. The standards are, and the state of the standards, that is the pathway to the publishing houses. And the standards are the pathway from the State Board of Education and the Department of Education of each state. And that is a large step to conquer. And that is why I think that I know that I'm indebted to Governor DeSantis, because he said, look at this textbook. And this is what he can't say it to me, because then he would be accused of vested interest. So he passes it through people. Sandra will know what it is that she's supposed to find. So I thought, Sandra, maybe I should be looking for Sharia law in our civics, and I didn't find that. But what I found was the New World Order. I found globalism, and I found two things perfectly there, that the standards do not in any way teach allegiance to the United States of America. And that is the biggest fault, and that is the most severe problem that we must conquer. And now with the absurdity of the illegal aliens pouring into our country, and those who already are here, and those who are here through a legal passage, many of them do not have a sense of allegiance to this country. And the civics in no way teaches how to be a citizen, what it means to strengthen. It doesn't even define what American citizenship is. And that is due to one word only. That lack of teaching and strengthening American citizenship is because we are no longer looking at American citizenship. We are looking at globalism. And that destroys the individual allegiance to this country. It destroys the fact that in order to bring down America, and none of us must be blind to this, because the purpose from beginning to end, whether it's Arab money or it's Soros money, the bottom line is to bring down the United States of America, not only as a constitutional republic, but to take it out of its path of leadership for the world. And that is globalism. And that is what we are looking at. So I said, all right, I'm not looking for Sharia law, which I have to look for quite often, because I do the impact of Islam on 6th through 12th grade. That's one of the things that I do. So I said, what is it that I'm looking for? And the first thing in K-5 standards, nowhere in kindergarten through 5th grade standards in the state of Florida, already in effect for 5 years, is there a mention that the United States of America is a constitutional republic. What we have become is a democracy. That is the first step of the failure and the demise of what we are. The second, now this is, if we look at K-5, this is when children should be taught the Pledge of Allegiance. And yet here we have in the standards for the state of Florida that they do not include the teaching of the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. They do not teach the national anthem. They do not, and when I say they do not teach, the standards are like a broad sentence, but underneath are the benchmarks, exactly what the students are supposed to be learning from kindergarten to first, etc., till we get to 5th grade. Nowhere in there do they learn the Pledge of Allegiance. They don't learn the national anthem. They do not learn anywhere, K-5, the names of the first presidents and the contributions to founding our country. And they are not taught the concept of a Judeo-Christian tradition, the Judeo-Christian tradition upon which the founding fathers built our country. So one of the things that's missing is there is no mention of the Hebrew Bible as one of the sources for the founding fathers. There is no mention anywhere, K-12, and we're just at K-5 at the moment, right now talking. Then we're speaking about the founding fathers. What do you do with state standards, K-5, that do not mention the name founding fathers? And in other standards, they say founding fathers, they do not capitalize. We have a peculiarity. I do not think this is a learning problem where the students do not know when to capitalize or not to capitalize. This is a form of indoctrination. You remove the capitalization, you remove the importance. Constitution with a capital C is supposed to be, that refers to like our Constitution. It's a particular document. Lowercase, it just means it's a generic term for a constitution. But K-5, no mention of the founding fathers. Now, what about American heroes? They're missing also. We do not provide examples of American heroes to our children and to the students. Why not? Because at the base of removing this, the base of removing the heroes is the beginning of the warping of American exceptionalism. And the US textbooks they not only eliminate, they denigrate. Those are two different things. We have to, when they are there, when there is anything about America, it's not American exceptionalism. There is a disdain in the textbooks. There is an open frontal attack on the worth of America, its place in the world, and what it has done in our country. Now, all of that is missing. I looked at this and I said, if I were to pick out one way to describe what we've just talked about, I would say I'm looking at standards for civics that are not pro-American and not pro-America. That makes them, you leave out all of that, you are not supporting this country, but you are not pro-American. And in my estimation, standards like that in K-5, they are not designed, and this is not a mistake. They are not designed to teach American citizenship. If you do not teach American citizenship, you do not build any sense of loyalty in the children. As you educate, you have to educate with words like loyalty. Explain what it means. Build it next to how you are loyal to the United States. How are you loyal to your community? How are you loyal to your state? And instead, the only thing you find is loyalty to family members, and the words are not there as such. So from K through 5, before we go forward to 6 through 8, because that's the division, K through 5 have these standards, have the major problem that they teach no loyalty to America, but they also do not teach any loyalty to the state of Florida. So you have, in that case, undermining the state and undermining the country. And I consider them to be dangerous. I don't take what I'm reading and what's being used very lightly, because when I have to review textbooks and take on a one-on-one battle, for lack of another word, when I go up against the CEO of a company like McGraw-Hill or a company like Pearson, when I read the United States textbooks, aside from the fake news, the incorrect, the revisionist history, the left-wing history, interpretation of our history, I'm also looking at textbooks and its standards, which do not create American citizens. And that is one major problem. That's just K through 5. Now, if you do not have standards and a benchmark for teaching the Pledge of Allegiance, and you do not teach allegiance to the flag, and you do not teach the national anthem, if you fast forward to our millionaire sports players, to our millionaire athletes who do not stand and to the Pledge of Allegiance, and they take a knee, quote unquote, before the games start, it is not difficult to understand where that is, because that comes from indoctrination. Yes, we have Black Lives Matter at school curriculum. We have this, and it's been in the U.S. schools since 2013. But these textbooks predate the appearance of BLM. They predate it. This is already ingrained in our students. I don't like to use the word kids. It's a normal word to use, but if we're dealing with education, we're dealing with students. And that is the way we must look at them. So this predates. It should not come as a surprise because BLM just arrived. Black Lives Matter may have just arrived on the scene, but the philosophy is ingrained for years. And it's ingrained for years by leading publishing houses that control the marketplace. So that's what from the K through 5. Now we go to the 6th grade through the 8th grade. Now we have the same problem. And the same problem when it starts kindergarten, and we're now looking at these problems in the 6th grade and 8th grade standards. And we're looking, because when Nick spoke about the critical thinking that the students should be doing, they should be doing their own thinking. Amazingly, about 5 years ago, the textbooks came out with sections on each chapter called critical thinking, questions for critical thinking. It isn't that the students are trained to think critically on their own. They are fed, they are indoctrinated, and they are led. And our students have been led by, I think that what fractured their reading ability. Our students do not read well because they have been on the computer. They have been with computer games. They have an attention span, I like to say, and my students always laugh, you have the attention span of a tsetse fly. Their minds go like this. And if you look at their minds and you watch their expressions in their eyes and their faces, years ago already, it reminded me of watching the games on the television. And everything goes quick, everything is jumped over. They are not taught to analyze. They are taught to repeat the indoctrination, and that is the critical thinking. Now, let's not kid ourselves. When you look at these textbooks, they cost a fortune, and that are now the publishing houses have reached really a period in their lives where they are creating beautiful, beautiful textbooks to look at. Well done, minus as many typos as they used to have. But what they are is a source of total indoctrination. And to make sure that it works, they're now the critical thinking. And if you then take the teacher's edition, there are two different things, because I have the privilege, I suppose. I not only have to review the student's edition, I used to try occasionally to get a teacher's edition. Governor DeSantis, it took a month to get 8 books here from Florida to Israel. I don't know where they went, but they finally arrived. The student's edition and the teacher's edition. The teacher's edition is the perfect answer to what has happened to our teachers. It is the indoctrination, it is the education, and it's no longer re-education, because they are being educated for the first time. You hand them the teacher's edition, and the teacher's edition said, ask this question, turn out this is the answer. The teacher's edition give the answers for the students, for the teachers. And the students, I've never saw, we used to call these things cheat sheets. You know, they would come with the little answers written down. You don't need a cheat sheet, just take the textbooks, the answers are in them. So this is what we are looking at. And we have to understand that now you're in 6th through 8th grade. Those are, in my estimation, the critical grades before we get to high school. Middle school means just that. It is middle in between elementary and high school, in the preparation and starting to prepare the students for going forward, and from going forward from high school to college. So a lot of the textbooks also have, in the critical thinking, they now have questions for the advanced placement. So the indoctrination starts in K, and not only goes through into high school, it has sections devoted to or dedicated to the advanced placement. And then critical thinking it is critical that our students think the way the left thinks. It is critical that they think the way George Soros is paying for them to think. And it began with the influx of the Saudi Arabian petrodollars. That began in the mid 1970s. That was how to change United States education K through 12. And it included in them doctoral dissertations on how to deal with the quote unquote elite media. Interestingly enough, CNN, New York Times, earmarked by Saudi Arabia, earmarked in doctoral dissertations. This is what we are looking at. So when I looked at the 6 through 8 standards, I thought, if this is what we find in Florida, we have to find this elsewhere. I know what the standards are called frameworks in California. I know what they teach, because I had the unpleasant pleasure of spending close to 9 months doing those. And it's very, the trickle down, I started finding the indoctrination in 1st grade textbooks, 1st grade frameworks. So now we're in the 6th grade to the 8th grade. The same thing. There's no way with these standards that the age group of 6th through 8th grade can become young people to support the Constitution of the United States, because they don't study it as such. They are not, we do not train advocates. We do not train advocates for the United States. We do not train advocates for the Constitution. And that is the age in which, in the textbooks, they are introduced, the students are now introduced to debating. They learn how to debate. And they learn how to debate very well, but they only know one side. And the side which they are indoctrinated in is the side that they have learned to push down the throats of everyone else. And that's a very young age. The same thing, missing from 6th through 8th is the Judeo-Christian tradition of this country. Now, and this I'm reading because it's important. I don't want to leave this out. In these standards in Florida, there's a failure to use or include the terminology constitutional republic when referring to our country. They do not speak or teach about the founding fathers and why the founding fathers actually created America as a with the background of the Judeo-Christian tradition. The omission of the founding fathers, the same thing as the omission of the Hebrew Bible as a resource. And these standards, these standards acknowledge, and this is interesting, they acknowledge and teach the role of ancient Greek and Roman civilizations in the structure and the forming of the Constitution. They do not mention the Hebrew Bible. They do mention John Locke. So everything other than what the founding fathers based the morality and based the legal structure. And we have to understand also that the word morality and ethics is those words are missing. The concept of morality and ethics as a base upon which citizenship should be created, it doesn't appear. The words don't appear. And in all due respect to the streets of the country, you can pick up your poop with the dog's poop with a little plastic bag. That does not make you a citizen. It just makes you clean. And that's about it. So we have the same thing. Now, and this is a very, very strange battle to be able to tell you about, because when I worked with Lori Cardozo Moore to revise these these standards, she said to me, "How about the original documents?" I said, "How about them?" I said, "I learned them." I said, "But we do have a problem that nowhere are civics taught with the original documents." And so when we put that the Declaration of Independence should be taught from the original document, the amendments to the Constitution should be taught with the original documents, the pushback against the standards that we created, the first thing that disappeared was the use of original documents. And now we do find the newest books coming out have in the back, they do have addendum, or they do have in the glossary, but they do have sections with excerpts from the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. However, because we don't use original documents, you could now have textbooks with where the best way to describe it is the manipulation of, that was a question that the governor wanted to know. Do our textbooks teach anti-Semitism, and is the Constitution being manipulated to do so? And that was a question, and I said it very nicely to Lori Cardozo Moore, for whom I work, and also to Roy White, for whom I work. I said, I want you to understand that I cannot open the last textbook I just started now is 1,050 pages. It's a Pearson textbook. I said, I cannot look into the index and look for something, how to teach anti-Semitism, how to manipulate the Constitution. This is not the old time way of reviewing textbooks. The index is as skewed as the material in the textbook. So that if they want you to find out, and I looked and I said, interesting, there was a whole section in one of the books that I did also for the governor, where the discrimination, we were under the Civil Rights Act, discrimination by religion is removed. Discrimination by race, by gender, by age, everything that the amendments protect us from. However, discrimination by religion is not mentioned, it's not in the textbook, and it's not in the list. And there's only one reason. You eliminate discrimination by religion, you eliminate the presence of the protection of the Jews of America by the Constitution. So I said, oh, this is fun. I will look into this. And so the pushback to use the original documents and sources came up, and excuse me, it came up, and Lori said to me, why do you think that there's this pushback? I said, it's very simple. If they read the Constitution and not an interpretation of the Constitution, if they read what is written in the Constitution, they will know that we are a constitutional republic. They will know what rights we have. They will know what limitations are upon the government. They will know what limitations are upon the people. So it's not in the benefit of any of the leftists at all to use original sources and documents. And original sources also include, let's say, the letter by George Washington that was written to the Jews of America at the time of the Revolutionary War, of our war. All of these documents that prove place, the places and how the people, I mean, the founding fathers did not create a constitution that is now described as a free moving document, a document which changes with time. They did not create that. They created a constitution with the ability to have amendments as the issues came up. We do not have a free-flowing constitution which, like a plant, if you give it water, will grow. And as you change from year to year, you find these people changing the Constitution. So this is the whole issue of original documents. And then I said, I wanted to see, when you speak about citizenship, we know what is defined as citizenship in the Constitution. And we know that there is a process, those who are born into it. But we also know that the Constitution establishes citizenship by birth and by naturalization. So I said, what has happened? Where is permanent residency? Where is the green card? Where is this in the process of becoming a citizen? And it does not appear. And the last one that I found, resident, was with a lowercase r. Well, anyone who lives someplace is a resident. The process of coming legally to this country and applying for the green card and living according to what the Constitution says, how do you have standards? That is missing that next step that also leads to naturalization. It has become now, by leaving it out, apologetics for the illegal aliens the illegal immigrants, and then you don't use the word alien and you don't use illegal, and you really have a trouble with vocabulary because nobody knows really what to call anyone anymore. We do, but we don't. So that also in 6 through 8, we have either illiterate people who write these standards do not know grammar. That's something which I ask permission to correct grammar, but we have the peculiarity of how do you show disdain for America? You put everything about America in lowercase letters. Everything, Republic, Constitution, that all of that, the Bill of Rights, the Founding Fathers, nothing is capitalized, which removes the specificity, first of all. A constitution is a noun. The Constitution with a capital C is our Constitution, or Florida State Constitution. The specificity and the honor paid to it. When have we really ever seen Founding Fathers always with the lowercase letters? So this is in it. And excuse me, the Judeo-Christian tradition, all of this, these are missing. The respect is missing. And the key to American citizenship is missing. So then you get to the 9th through 12th grade. And this, I have to say, honestly, that they are inadequate. A lot of them finished high school, and they may or they may not go to college, but the college system is already indoctrinated. The teachers are indoctrinated. The professors are indoctrinated. You are looking at universities that have granted PhDs based on doctoral dissertations that are fallacious, that have terrible omissions, that are anti-American, and they are granted the PhD. And those PhDs, those doctoral dissertations, once they get their number through the Library of Congress, become actually the accepted history and the research for the next generations. And we have that. And I did a 4-year study of the doctoral dissertations for the Consulate of Israel, because they said, you would do anything for Israel, right? And I said, yes. Well, you're a volunteer, right? I said, oh yes, I'm probably the most highly paid volunteer in the United States. What do you want me to do? Will you look at the doctoral dissertations in American education? Because if an Israeli professor does it, it's manipulating the American education system. You're an American, yes. You're a university professor, yes. Will you look at them? I said, of course I will. 4 years. And the discovery of, that's where I discovered the doctoral dissertations charting the changes in K through 12, explicit. That's where I found all of these things. And this is what we have here. We have now our students in 9 through 12, they are not taught how to make judgment calls. They are not taught to evaluate. They are not taught how to vote and why to vote and the importance of the vote for maintaining the freedom of a constitutional republic. They are not taught to make any kind of what I call political and behavioral choices to live by the law of the land. And missing from the standards K through 12 is any reference to the Constitution and the rule of law, with or without a capital. I would have been happy just to find it, but we put it incorrect with a capital R, capital L, but they are not taught that. They are not taught that. So this is what we find. And again, all those lowercase letters, again, no permanent residency, no green card, nothing concerning the legal road to American citizenship. And we have a major problem. We had a problem before, but that is a major problem now. How do you make a legal road to American citizenship when you've taken all the restriction off the borders and they're streaming in and you can't find them? And they will be integrated within a society that already is totally confused. So this is the, I don't think that Governor DeSantis was really happy. He didn't say he was unhappy, but I said, your standards do not impart or teach, quote, the importance of voting on the local, the state, or the federal level. They destroy the importance of the Electoral College. They have nothing designating states' rights and federal power. Therefore, they undermine the states' rights of every state. So this is what I would say. This is not what I would say. This is what I'm saying these standards are. But most deadly, if a young person arrives at the 12th grade and has not been taught how to defend the constitutional republic against all enemies at home and abroad, we have already found the way to undermine the loyalty of our military to this country. And this is where I think this country is. And we are still having the final discussions on these. I'm very happy to say that the standards, as we corrected them with a little bit of back and forth. I'm really good at, if I'll let you keep this word, will you put in my word? And we fixed a couple of the problems that way. But this is where we are. And what I think is most important is that we already have the promise, and not just the verbal promise. We have the written promise that if the standards, the civic standards, once they are approved, and they're approved but have to be voted on, they go to Tennessee, and the legislature has said the same thing. These will become the standards for the state of Tennessee. Hopefully, and I believe this is what excellence means, that it doesn't become a territorial battle on who wrote what and who said what. If Florida produces a set of K through 12 standards for civics, nothing will change in education. Because if we don't correct what is wrong in how we rule ourselves and how we protect the constitutional republic, we have no chance of addressing the problems in American history textbooks, US history textbooks, or world history, geography. And now, I'm getting my first assignment at math textbooks. And I jokingly said, I don't really go beyond 2 and 2 makes 4. They don't care whether it's not Common Core math. They're looking for the critical race theory, which is permeating the math books. So this is what the importance of the civic standards are. And this is why I believe that until we take back our Constitution, we have serious problems. We need to take back the Constitution, the rule of law, and we have to understand the reason Black Lives Matter wants to use only the word African Americans. There are no Black Americans. Black Lives Matter uses only one terminology, African Americans. Without using that, they do not have the base for systemic racism and for this country being a slave-bearing country. And the last material that I just was given, that was handed to Texas, and they said, would you read it? The peculiarity, the word slavery is no longer in it. It has become the word enslavement. And there are the vocabulary for all of this. And I truly believe that we don't go forward. We need a revolution in this country, but it is an educational revolution. It is a revolution that says we have a constitution. This is what the Constitution says. If the courts don't support it, get rid of the judges. We have to do a cleaning of our house and put the Constitution and the founding fathers in front of us and build from the bottom up, because the base on which America stands is beautiful. It's constitutional. It's not a fluid document that you keep writing. It's a strong document that has amendments, the amendment process for change. So that's what I came to tell you, or I'm here to tell you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Alfonsi, and it was fascinating, and I can validate almost everything you're saying. Some of people that here know, I give my students a citizenship test when they first come into my classroom, and then I also give them a constitutional test. But it's
Bless you.
But it's the Russian Constitution. I just replace Russian Federation with United States everywhere, and it's only about 7% of students identify that they're not really reading the United States Constitution. Most of them think they are reading the United States. So the problem is at alert levels, the alarms are blaring, and people need to start listening. And so you're doing fantastic work. We are going to open it up to questions from the audience. So if you have a question, make sure you put it in the chat room. One of the things that I wanted to know that I had a question on, you said that some of these curriculums go back long before the last 5 years, 6 years. How long have you seen in Florida or anywhere else that the same curriculum was being used? For how long, up until finally someone exposed it?
I think that it hasn't been exposed. Let me put it this way, because I worked before I saw standards. I was reviewing textbooks and going one-on-one with the publishing houses. I always thought incorrectly. I mean, I admit that it was incorrect until I got to this work in Florida. I thought that the publishing houses were creating the biased, incorrect textbooks based on foreign money being put into them, which wasn't the case. The foreign money was not going into the publishing houses. It went for the purpose of rewriting the standards. And the standards are what drive the publishing houses. Until I learned that and I saw it, so my estimation would have to be, as far as the Constitution and how it is not being taught, I would say a minimum of 10 years. Minimum of 10 years. That the problem, but the difference is, it was much more subtle. It wasn't a frontal attack on America. It was subtle. So the blame, I was one of the ones that said it, we have to go after the publishing houses, never ever dreaming that I said, when I got the standards, the civic standards, and I read them and I wrote my first review, I said, your state board of education and the Department of Education has been infiltrated by globalists, and you never noticed. So how do you not notice? It's because it was done slowly, and you love language like I love language, and we look at language. 95% of people don't learn language because we don't teach children how to read. They're not taught to read in between the lines even. And one of the things that, if people said, how can you have a PhD in medieval French language and literature and do this? I said, I had 6 years of Latin. I said, I won the citywide Latin contest in Washington, D.C. I said, I'm a linguist. Linguists play with language. And therefore, this was something where I learned. I was taught to read in between the lines. I was taught to understand what the author was saying. We don't teach that. So these standards were very subtle, but they're in place for 5 years, and
Yeah.
they are globalist. But I can go back 10 years for things that have disappeared out of the textbooks, things that we are not teaching. But until this, to tell you honestly, until I was given the honor of now doing standards, I had no idea. We were raised believing in the education was sacred and that knowledge is sacred. Therefore, why would we would look at the external, which would be the textbooks, not at the Department of Education having a globalist message. But I would say easily 10 years, probably goes back 15 years if I would, because when I made Aliyah, I brought a lot of my textbooks that I reviewed from the earlier years, because the only way I can tell whether things have deteriorated is to put them together. If I would go back to some of these from the 1980s that I brought with me, I would probably find that it goes back into that period.
And a question from Lawrence Block: who's responsible for selecting the people who write the state standards, and what's the process for them being
The
approved?
Department of Education interviews and hires. That's
Uh,
because I said, I mean, I would never say it to anybody's face openly. I said, how can people be so stupid that they don't read it? Well, the answer to that is, oh, they've read it, and it has exactly the ideology that they want in it. And leading American organizations that do not say the Pledge of Allegiance and do not start meetings as you do, they are not looking for the Constitution to reappear, because they are in effect globalists, and they are in effect now. I mean, they're communist, socialist, anarchists. We have a lot of names for the people that are running this country.
Yeah.
But
And just so everyone's aware too, many of the people that do serve in the State Department of Educations were never teachers. They don't understand the classroom. They've never walked foot as a teacher in the classroom. They don't know how to manage students. They don't know classroom management at all. They don't know how to write their own curriculums and lesson plans. And they're the ones that are making education policy that we all have to suffer
but
from.
but also what you just said, like when I started doing the reviewing of the textbooks, what I meant were textbook barns. That's what they were called, where teachers who needed to earn some money on the side were asked to write by a publishing house to write a chapter in this book or a chapter in that book. And when you find a science teacher writing history or a music teacher writing science, I had very bizarre textbooks, and I thought they weren't university professors who were writing it. These were teachers that need to have an extra, earn more money. So because they were a teacher, the therefore was easy, let them write these books. We were better off with errors in the textbooks, which the publishing houses would correct, than we are with the agenda-based textbooks now being written again by university professors for cases.
Absolutely. And if you look at how many professors have also been compromised by foreign entities,
Yeah.
and how much money that they've made, so God only knows. So Lawrence Block also, he wants to state something. He was a superintendent in New York City high schools. So Lawrence, you could unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I did that. Well, thank you for that presentation. It was really quite interesting. I was thinking that if you went to a district outside of Florida and offered to do this presentation, I would say 9 out of 10 times they probably wouldn't let you into the district because of the people who are in charge. So one of the issues is that, and I agree with you, it's not the rewriting of the standards that's priority, but it's educating the populace on what's going on. Because if you were in any parent group right now and you did this presentation, I would imagine 90% of the parents would be totally shocked at what's going on in our schools. So I mention that because in the first session, we were talking about critical race theory. And some of the recommendations were that parents have to get involved in the school. But I think I was thinking about it for the last couple of weeks, and as we start to better understand exactly the strategic planning that has gone into the left's ability to influence education and to influence almost all walks of our life, both federal, state, and city. I think we have to come to terms with the fact that this requires a very, very careful response and a strategic one on our part. It's not sufficient to say that parents should get involved in the PTA, because look what they have to deal with. There's standards that they're not aware of. There's procedures as far as how to get involved, what to complain about. I took a look at our state website, and I started to identify all of the allusions that are made to non-discriminatory practices. And I'm not a lawyer, but I was wondering whether those non-discriminatory practices that are part of our state law can apply to actually discrimination against white kids as far as their whiteness and them being guilty and so forth. And so just taking that, and I'll just end my comment, I think that there's so much complexity to this that it's not responding solely to the standards. It's not responding to how did critical race theory get into our schools in the first place. This was done very deliberately and almost underhandedly, because not too many people were aware of it until most recently. So I think we need to have some type of powwow as far as like who does what to whom, what is our overall strategy, because the left seems to be real detail. They attend to detail. Everyone has a role, and they carry this out with a great degree of orchestration. And I think, my sense is that we tend to complain, we tend to be shocked about it. But as far as actually countering it, I think that's something that calls for careful deliberation and planning, because without that, we're not in the game right now against these people. Yeah. And in order to get to the game, we have to change the way we proceed as far as problem solving, identification, and problem solving. So I would say that your discussion right now brought that further home to me. When you go, oh my God, to get to this point.
I want to answer you because I agree with everything you just said, that what made America grow strong and made us have good citizens and the citizenship was the creation of the night schools that educated the immigrants who came in, teaching them citizenship and teaching them the Constitution. It was part of the night school system, and that was part of what made America strong. We were a country of immigrants. We were a country of citizens who were citizens loyal to the United States, and we educated the immigrants in that. And I think that one of the things that has to be done, aside from we're talking about the standards and the students, I think that we have to acknowledge how many generations of parents came through the same education system with the same textbooks, just a different edition, and that we need to institute. I mean, the Zoom is a very fine replacement for going out to night school because we can do it like this, but I think we need to address this with the parents, with those who will be able to guide their children, because they don't know it either. And then your comment about not being able to do this in certain counties. I was chair of National Hadassah's Curriculum Watch, which started all the textbook reviews. And I did the history of Judaism. I did Judaism as a world religion, and I did the history of the Shoah, and I did the history of Israel from biblical times to every year, which made it present. And they sent me to Georgia. I went down to the region, the Hadassah region in Georgia. And one of the things I was supposed to speak on was on the impact of Islam on the textbooks and on the Jews. Well, fine, no problem in the Orthodox synagogue. Everything went fine. No problem. You know, there were some shocked conservative Jews in the conservative synagogue. I was not allowed into the Reform synagogue, and I was asked to leave, and I never spoke. So I said, I've been thrown out of better places than this. But what you said, I'm doing. This is because of Sarah. Sarah said, would you do this and speak to the Republican Club? I said, if it's on our side and to help, definitely. And I have a passion for New York. I lived in New York and in Queens for 30 some years before I moved to the Poconos and then came to Israel. So,
Sandra, if I just may, and then I'll be done, I promise, Nick. But the comment that you just made is that it's also, we have to come to terms with the fact we don't have the partnership with technology. We don't have the media. So I think part of this planning has to be, how do we reach out with that as a given? Now, we're not going to get coverage in the media, and we're not going to have the cooperation of technology. And so I think, again, very careful deliberation with an honest assessment of what we do have, how we can communicate, and what will not be tenable as far as we move forward. So I think your story about the Reform Temple sums it up.
Well, and I also think that you have to realize that there has to be short-term goals. There also has to be long-term goals. Obviously, you're not changing the system overnight. I mean, you're talking about a system that was created and in the works for the last 60, 70 years, and to break it all down is going to be extraordinarily difficult. I mean, one of the key solutions is more conservatives have to get in civil service. They have to forego the private sector and go into civil service. And you're talking about, that's going to take years to get enough conservatives to actually make a difference. So we have to look both short term and long term. As far as media goes, the media is paying attention as far as conservative outlets and Republicans outlets. And there'll be something happening next week that I'll be announcing next week. But when we look at the media, the critical race theory, I think a lot of attention has been paid to critical race theory. And in a way, it's a good thing because it got people to open their eyes and at least pay attention to what's going on. However, the problems, as Dr. Alfonsi said, it goes long before we started to see the introduction of critical race theory. I mean, once again, I've been teaching for 15 years, and each year students are coming in with less and less knowledge of the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. And if I asked them 2 years ago what critical race theory was, they would have no clue. They would be completely clueless about it. So it's something that's much bigger. Now, the way I saw a question was asked about the whole how did critical race theory and 1619 Project get pushed in if it's been discredited? And it's because the loons are controlling the debate. They control the narrative. The loudest voices are the ones that are controlling the narrative. And it doesn't matter that they've been thoroughly discredited. Nobody's held accountable anymore. And I think that's the biggest thing. So, Dr. Alfonsi, you want to talk about the lack of accountability?
The lack of accountability goes, it goes through the system. I'm going to start with the system that makes the most money on exactly that it is not held to any accountability, and those are the publishers. The publishing houses pander. The publishing houses will do revisionism. They would do denial, but they do historical revisionism in order to sell their books to states that are globalist, that states that are biased, and there is no accountability when you go to the publishing house. The state of Texas, when we did the last textbook, they're one of the 21 states that has the state textbook adoption process. And we found 1,500 errors in the Prentice books that were up for purchase in Texas. There are 15 state board members. 11 of the 15 said to Prentice, you make these changes or we do not buy your textbook. So Prentice made some of the changes. Everyone was, look, they made changes. What they don't seem to realize is that they're now publishing their books digitally, which means you, with a strike of the key, You make a change after you sold your book, you go back and you change it right back because the students are studying from digital textbooks. That's a new problem. There's no accountability whatsoever when we have the Department of Education. They're taking money and using money, and they did it in order to promote Common Core. So there's no accountability for the revisionism. There's no accountability from the bottom up or the top down for the racial destruction that is being done by our education system. We have a racist education system, and we really have to look at it as such, because this is really not based on racism in the way we understood Black against white. This is in my mind, the racism that we now see is a form of anarchy to bring down the government with anarchy, with terrorist attacks. I mean, so we have domestic terrorists. Why don't we use the terminology? So there is no accountability because we have an education system that is selling systemic racism as a way to promote anarchy and bring down this country. So I find no accountability. That's why I think that Governor DeSantis is like the Lone Ranger, and I have the feeling I've become the Tonto. So we're doing, because he's strong, and his mind does not waver. So that I find no accountability. No accountability.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you, Dr. Alfonsi. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe and Phil.
Well, we do have a couple of other questions that came in. One is how can we get this message out to the parents of the students in the city system? We do have a little more time to answer questions, another 5 or 10 minutes. And also the teachers that are teaching our kids these leftist ideas are getting their orders from the teachers union. The question is, who's funding and influencing the unions? So we have those two questions that are on the floor.
Which I will turn over to Lawrence Block and also to Nick, because I can tell you what I think, but that's not, I can't deal in telling what I think. So I would like Lawrence Block and also Nick Giordano to respond, because Nick addressed it to begin with, so did Lawrence.
Yeah, as far as the unions go, it's fairly simple. I mean, obviously the union has their dues, but then they also receive money from all the special interest groups out there. They're fully supported by left-wing groups like Soros's groups that have very deep pockets. And one thing that people really don't pay that much attention to is the revolving door between union leadership, politicians, the media class, all of them. It's all the same people that go into these positions when they leave administrations. And so it's very easy to actually follow the money if you have the resources to do it. Why none of the conservative outlets have actually done this? I can't answer that question. Because what they should be doing is investigating the contributions and looking at the LLCs and who sits in, who started them, who filed the paperwork for them, and you trace it back. But it's all left-wing money. I mean, they know how to raise money.
Oh, yes.
They're money-making gurus when it comes to raising funds for social causes. And they've also been able to do it under the radar because it's easy to pay attention to major races in the country when it comes to things like the president or Congress, something like that. People don't pay attention to what's going on in Board of Election races. They don't pay attention to union leadership, internal politics of what happens with that. And so there's a lot that goes under the radar.
Yeah, if I may, also, I forgot to mention Eric Spinner was one of my colleagues when I was a superintendent. But in regards to the union, there are many conservative teachers that feel that they have no place to turn to. However, this is another type of strategic plan. I think some of these teachers have to be sort of like enabled to grieve the union because the union is allowing this to affect teachers. Like teachers have to undergo critical race training. 5 times a year at least. I know because my kids are teachers now. And it is really a demeaning type of experience that they're going through. And it's very intimidating because if you raise your hand and you disagree, your job is on the line and the union allows it. So I think there's a group here that needs to be sort of pulled in, and they have to be the group to challenge the union on allowing these type of practices to take root in school.
And Lawrence, just to piggyback that for a second, because my union, years ago, my union started to get into some of the social issues, and there was a few of us that quickly slapped it down, and we told the union leadership, hey, listen, you're there for wages and benefits. You're there for the grievance process. You're not there for social issues, and you're alienating a lot of professors. And they stopped because we spoke up. And I think that's one of the more important things, is to speak up. And I get the fear that's out there and everything. But if you keep on letting them bully us,
Yes.
it's only going to continue and get worse. If we speak up against it, it will end, because I could guarantee you there's a lot of people that are paying dues that don't want to be paying, and their money going to this crap. That's for sure. And guess what? I don't have to take any of these implicit bias trainings or anything like that. I'm not required to take any. I have to take other trainings, sexual harassment and all that sort of stuff. But as far as the racial trainings or anything, we're not required to do that, and we're not going to do that. We already stood up to our union and said we're not going to do it. So I think the idea is that those that are on the conservative side have to start speaking up, even though I know that they're going to be targeted. But if we all remain silent, nothing's going to change.
Nick, I think we have
guys.
to reach out to some of these people so they know they're not alone. That there are organizations they could join and affiliate with. Because right now, for the conservatives, many of them are very, very isolated, and they don't see a next step. So I think that's something that perhaps we could explore as an organization.
Some way.
Right.
Of
Let me break in here. I put Michael Ackerman up on the screen because I thought his comment deserved maybe some feedback from Nick and Lawrence. And if Sandra wants to get in on that, she can. But Michael, are you there? Take yourself off mute, Mike. Off mute.
Got it.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Michael.
All right. So basically, I think the comment that I share with all, and I'm not looking at it at the moment, but in a nutshell, the question is how to get. And by the way, thank you, Dr. Alfonsi. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, the moderators. Amazing content, and learned a lot. And obviously, it validates everything that make my blood boil for the last 13 years. So, but I recall when Sarah and Irene were doing work on textbooks, and I don't know if that was with you also in the background, Dr. Alfonsi, with the Islamist content, and some of that issue is related to Khalil Gibran School. I had mentioned that about 6 weeks ago, I had brought that in a public forum to Senator Lieberman. And I told him, I said, there was a concern about school book, textbook companies with Saudi money infiltrating the textbooks and, making way into California school system, into Texas, and rolling its way to the rest of the country. And he said, oh, you mean that you're concerned about infiltration of our educational system with foreign money? And, we'll set up a meeting, call my office. And Mike and Irene Alter went to Washington and sat with the special assistant to Senator Lieberman and had a long meeting, and absolutely nothing came of it. And this was 13 years ago. So the thing that I wanted to mention, about all these great ideas about school boards and individuals and parent-teacher conferences and individual conservative teachers that are under the weight of this oppressive knee on everyone's collective neck. There are think tanks in Washington that are very well funded by conservative people with deep pockets. And I'm not just talking about like the media outlet with very few. We only got, let's say, two or three of them. We know who they are. But there are conservative outlets, whether it's, I don't know if it's AEI or Hudson or FDD, but these organizations are devoted to defending democracy from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that's really what we're talking about here. So my suggestion is, if this can be presented or packaged in such a way, Texas and California and Kentucky, or that what you're working on, Dr. Alfonsi, I get it. But on a broader subject, on a broader scale, to roll it out through 50 states and have it get a flashpoint of attention, if we can package it in a way that it can be handed, or we bring a couple of people from this think tank and that think tank and another think tank, and we have, a very small parlor meeting on Zoom with a few people and say, this is what we've discovered. American education, K through 12 and higher education, is under attack from enemies foreign and domestic. And here's the content, and here's the bullet. You have the gun, you'll get the far reach, and basically take this work and extend it by using the infrastructure of some of these conservative organizations who have backers and funders with very deep pockets already in place, who will love content. They have content at these organizations on China, North Korea, Russia. This is domestic. Those are foreign. This is domestic. That's my point. Yeah,
I appreciate it. Is
That's
there
my
a
point.
specific question or
I
comment?
just want to touch on what Mike just said for a second, because it really highlights the difference between liberal organizations, the left-wing organizations, and conservative organizations. Conservative organizations are great at issuing white papers. They are horrible at activism. Left-wing think tanks are great at activism. They're horrible with white papers.
Right.
And that's really what explains it. Even if and I agree, I think that conservative think tanks should be taking a look at this. They do have deep pockets, but if you notice, they issue white papers on everything, and yet nothing changes. The narrative doesn't change. The far left still controls a lot of these areas. In fact, a lot of it is actually frustrating, where you want to bash your head into a wall with the amount of money that flows to these organizations and how they're never really out there actually organizing people, because that's what it comes down to. It comes down to organizing. It comes down to people actually getting out there to force change. It's not going to change by just, a couple of people going on outlets and a couple of papers being written. People have to be out in front, actually forcing it, organizing. And that's where it becomes complex, because the right hasn't built out the organizational infrastructure to have that activism. And that's why I think it's difficult for us. We need to get that. I'm not saying that we ignore that. I think your point is an excellent point. I think that it goes to a national security issue, and it is important that these conservative think tanks actually start using their money for actual use and get out there and actually make a difference. I just don't know how open they're going to be. That's what
I mean, how are you going to get in the middle of AEI and the Hudson Institute to fund? Let's just put a number out there: $250,000 to fill up billboards in the county of Queens. All right, just to start bringing it to the attention of the electorate.
That's a conversation for another.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time here. We have to, wrap up the program, but I'd like to finish up with a few concluding remarks from Dr. Alfonsi, especially what you've been, teaching us. We're your students tonight, and what you've taught us is a great deal, because knowledge really does have power. And I'd like you to, conclude, and what the most important things you could leave us with, especially the need for an educational revolution in this country. So please, and thank you so much, Dr. Alfonsi.
You're welcome. Before I give you that little, whatever I can figure out, I would like to say something to Michael also, that we have a problem with our children, and we say a lot about the PTA, we say a lot about the parents, but there has to be a system developed to protect our young people against the bullying, because that is why parents have stopped going to the PTA, because the backlash against the children, and when they're and especially high school, when they go even to the principal and such, So while we're talking about finding a system to be able to reach the conservative teachers and strengthen them and let them come out and come forward, I'm telling you honestly, because I tried to work with my students on the university level, but I get parents who contact me, how do we protect our children? If we go and we talk to the principal or we go to the PTA, there is a backlash against the students. So we have to put that into our magic thinking tank, that if we're going to work on steps, one step we have to take into consideration is that we have to come forth and demand that our students, our young people are not abused and bullied for wanting to learn the truth. And that
Students' Bill of Rights.
yes.
Yeah.
But we also, political ideology needs to be included in the Civil Rights Act as a protection.
Yes.
Like
So-
Trump did with the Jewish students on campus to protect them from bullying or whatever that was that he signed into law last year, something like that.
But that is, and what I would leave you with, and I thought it's like I've come a full circle, because I made Aliyah, and in September 2018 and November 2018, the State Board of Education in Texas said, you must come and testify, because CARE is trying to destroy one sentence in the TEKS, the standards, the Texas standards, and you must come and you must defend it, so we keep this one sentence. And I thought, would have been much easier just to bring me when I was living in the United States. Now I'm doing this work. And I thought, God has a strange way. He trained a very good professor of medieval French, who then made Aliyah and is now doing the standards for civics. And I will tell you honestly that we must take back our Constitution. That is the message, and it has to become a universal message. It has to become on every level. We need to take back the Constitution of this country, and we must impart the message of the rule of law, because only by doing that will we control the anarchy that is taking over this country.
Amen.
That is what I see.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you so much. So, let's really thank, our featured speaker, Dr. Sandra Alfonsi. And I want to thank our participants in the program, Michael and Lawrence Block. I want to thank Professor Giordano. This has been a really incredible hour and a half. We've learned, a great deal. It's being recorded, so we're going to put this out there on our website in a couple of days. So I would suggest that everybody share this. Come back. I know I'm going to listen to it again, because knowledge is power. We've learned a great deal tonight. Thank you so much for everyone being part of this experience. We're going to continue this. This is not the last meeting we're going to have on this topic. We're going to continue this. So everybody hang in there, and, we'll be back.
Thank you.
Say. So now, we have to end the program with, some announcements. If there are any announcements, we have our leaders of New York Metro Act. Mark, if you want to make your announcement.
Thank you, Phil. NY Metro.
I'm sorry, Mark, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Mark.
Okay, very rare that you can't hear me. Okay, NewYorkMetroAct.org, NYMetroAct.org, or your recent email from Phil. Monday night, we are having Michael Cutler, retired senior INS officer, who is going to speak to us about what is actually happening down on the southern border. It's important, but you have to be registered in order to attend. There's no charge, of course, but you have to be registered. NYMetroAct.org. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any other announcements?
Phil, our URL is up on the chat for NY Metro Act.
Okay, if there are no other announcements,
I have, can I announce something?
yes, please.
So I'm working for the Marvin Drift Code campaign. He's running for New York City Council of District 26. And if anyone is available to canvass with me, that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Adine.
Just
You're
want
welcome.
Any
one
other?
thing, one thing, I just want, it's now 4:30 in the morning in Israel. I want to thank Dr. Alfonsi for your strength, and go to sleep. Thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Yes,
Dr.
Sal,
Advice and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank
Sal?
you.
Sal,
Asher Koach, Sandra.
Hi, Sarah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank you
all.
so much. Yashiko.
as
Thank
we
you.
used to say,
Dr.
geschlafen.
Yeah, I will consider that now.
Beautiful, Eric.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
night, all.
Sandra.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Great
Thank
stuff.
you.
Sorry that
Thank you
Sarah and
very
I
much.
couldn't add
Thank you.
things tonight, but we would have liked to be able to add some.
We
And I-
have a
and-
closing prayer
I know.
coming up.
Yes, yes, do we have Pastor Dana Dice? Are you on the call?
He was.
He was.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm here.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, Pastor Dana Dice from the Gospel Light Baptist Church is with us. Also, our newest member of the Board of Directors of the Queens Village Republican.
Hey.
Congratulations, Pastor. Please lead us in the closing prayer.
All right. Let's pray. Father God, we come to you and we're thankful tonight for Dr. Alfonsi. Thank you for Professor Giordano. And thank you for the awareness that you've given us tonight, and a lot of things, a lot of thoughts going through my mind, how important it is that we teach our children, how important it is as parents to be involved in our children, and even for my sake and for many that are here tonight, that we would be involved in our grandchildren's lives. Help us to take back the Constitution. Help us, God, to do what we can. Lord, so many things can be done on a grassroots level, and help us to be diligent to work in our areas and talk to people. We do pray for the family of Arlene Moradian. We pray for them and the comfort and strength they need. We pray for the family, the Mulaney family, and pray that you would help the many people that are working at the 107th precinct. And we just look to you and ask for your help. We ask that you would guide and direct leadership in our Republican Party here in Queens and in the Republican Club, and we just need your help. We thank you, dear God, for our Judeo-Christian ethics that we believe in the United States, and thank you, Lord, for the Bible. Thank you for the gospel of Jesus Christ. We give you thanks for the day and ask, God, that you be with us now. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Amen.